I mean, which, you know, for some people might actually be an improvement of quality of life depending on your job. But
yeah, here we go. A new product from Apple. It's the iThink.
no.
This is just a little piece of art that I found randomly on the internet that, you know, people are thinking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Go to the next slide.
Sure.
I didn't have the other one. That's
all right.
cool. So this is a. So there's some, you know, greater non-technical implications of this, right? So 2020,
Sure.
you're going to the MoMA or the Smithsonian or the Portrait Gallery because you know, the Mona Lisa is traveling there, and you go in, you pay your ticket, but you know, your kid has these great optical implants that allows them to see, and you go in and you go into the museum, you're looking at the stuff. I mean, your kid asks you, "Mommy, why can't I see the art?" Well, honey, actually, it's because I couldn't afford the DRM license, so they've disabled that your ability to see this stuff. Sorry. Yeah, it is a digital divide issue.
So, I mean, social class becomes huge instantaneously, right? There's the haves and the have-nots, and as there always have been, but this takes it to an entire another level. And so as a result, there will always be, you know, people that have nots, which will have hand-me-downs, which will have older grade technology. And has anyone ever found that computer in your, you know, cousin's basement that was handed from your grandmother that was infected with malware from, you know, 1995? We're going to talk about the same thing, but it's going to be people's arms, it's going to be people's eyes, and you're going to have to be debugging 6 versions of firmware on someone's eyes to make sure that it starts rendering correctly again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of malware where you'll get AIDS because this shit's hard to keep.
Yeah, there's just the part of the problem with this talk is that there were so many different areas to go. We've left out a lot of stuff, and one of the things is that we'll show you the video if we have time at the end. But they're using viruses to deliver targeted genetic modifications to nerve cells to enable that cell to react in new ways to what they call optogenetic therapy, which is, you know, you send a blue light, it turns the cell on. You send a green light, it turns the cell off. And they've done some studies with basically finding exactly which cell is necessary to make a mouse turn right. And so they turn the light, you know, he's running around in his little box, and they turn the light on, and he goes right all of a sudden. The light goes off, and he stops. He starts just kind of walking around. We'll show you the video in a bit. So the conclusions.
We're screwed.
I mean, it's a common theme at this conference, right? I mean, you know, we've already done it wrong. You know, we're going to continue to do it wrong. This is probably not a space where we want to do it wrong. We don't want to borrow the machine-to-machine communication code that's being used in our fantastically well-secured SCADA networks. You know, we want to build. I think this is an area where we want to build it from scratch. So this is really kind of a call to action to everyone. It's highly likely that all of you in this area, under 40, under some age, you guys are going to go to the hospital later. At some point, when you get older, right now you're invincible. Drink all you want. But later on, when you get that replacement liver, your cyborg liver, you're going to leave the hospital with something. And you're probably going to want to be really interested in, well, how was this developed? What firmware is it running? What revision am I on? Does my doctor really know what he's talking about?
And can I add a subroutine that'll make me sober in 20 minutes for this talk?
Well, yeah. I mean, actually Wired magazine has an article from 2005 that talks about a guy who got an ocular implant, and he hacked it. He made it work better.
So what we're trying to avoid is basically in 15, 20 years, you're walking down the street and a little emote pops up that says press X to not die, or send $5 to this PayPal account to keep walking. We're trying to avoid that situation from happening, but I mean, we're looking at, you know, the same level of security that was put into some of the very earliest technologies from computers from a browser standpoint and a malware standpoint being, you know, now ported over to the implants, and we really need to fix this before it becomes a real problem. So where do we go from here? If you get an implant, or you know someone that has an implant, or you can find somebody that has an implant, ask a ton of questions. Find out where it was built, find out what it does. I'm very dedicated to my craft, but I was not going to go through elective cardio surgery to get an implant so I could pull it back out and play with it. The cheapest one we could find was about 25 grand, secondhand, off of Craigslist in LA. I don't know if I necessarily trust that to begin with.
Yeah, I think it was a surgeon that was going out of business or something.
Yeah, and eventually implants are will start to port over to other organisms. Like a lot of the research done now is on mice, but you know somebody will want to keep their cat or dog alive much longer if the implant is available. So
there's some really cool videos on YouTube of monkeys feeding themselves with robot arms, yeah. just by thinking about bringing the food to their mouth. It's awesome.
And
go hack your grandpa.
Yeah, if you get to. No, please don't. All right.
So this is how you can get a hold of us. I mean, we're really interested in talking about this stuff more, and this is not our day job. Adam and I do other stuff. He's an attacker, I'm a defender. And but we just got to talking about this stuff and started doing some Google searches and some research, and holy crap, there's a lot of stuff out there that's really interesting. And so we'd love to develop these ideas, maybe work on that threat model for a cyborg. If you have better ways of splitting up the space, let me know. These are how you can get a hold of us. Anything else? Is that it?
I think it's
Okay.
all
You, yeah. So questions?
Did you look at any of the liability waivers that are signed?
Liability papers.
No, did we look at any waivers?
When you get an augmentation?
Liability waivers when you get an augmentation. Did we look at those? Liability waivers, yeah.
Tell you if the companies are thinking, forward-thinking enough to protect themselves.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. I mean, that probably would be a good place to look. We didn't look at any of that stuff because when we thought about liability waivers, we're like, that's not going to protect me. Yeah.
The question was, do you get a liability waiver or EULA? I'm pretty sure you get both with one of these.
Yeah. Yeah, you get both. There was another question over here?
Oh, it's just
Comment?
all those liability waivers do is protect the company. They do
Yeah.
nothing to protect you.
Right.
Yeah, so he's saying that all the liability waivers do is protect the company, not you. But I think the point of the gentleman in the back was that they can probably reveal some really good information about what they're trying to protect. A lot of this stuff is proprietary too, even though some of the companies are looking at Zigbee and some other, low voltage wireless stuff. So, any other questions? Yes.
When I'm listening to your talk, I can't help but think of how long we've been doing electronic warfare.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, I'm reminded of that story in Iraq of the drones. The insurgents were intercepting the video feeds from the drones using a $26 piece of software they downloaded from the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, so now all you're doing is basically going that one step further
Yeah.
and saying now the equipment that they're hacking can be inside you.
Yeah, so he's saying that, we've been doing cyber warfare for a long time, and yet we end up with a scenario where the video feed on a UAV can be captured by a $26 piece of equipment in Afghanistan or Iraq. And we're extending that a little bit. Yeah, in fact, my family and I bought a Prius recently. Yeah, I know. And we were doing the test drive for it, and it has a wireless key that authenticates, interacts with the car. You don't have to plug it in or anything. It just has to be near the front of the car. And in fact, I think it's been months since I've seen the key. So when we're doing the test drive, the guy who was selling the car, sleazy guy, said, "Do either of you have a pacemaker? Because this could potentially interfere with that." It's not a scenario I want to deal with. I don't want to just happen to walk by Adam's lab with this device, and just because he's fooling around with some stuff, walk by HackerBot Labs. They never do any crazy stuff with radios there.
So from an attacker perspective, one of the interesting things is a lot of these systems are closed and they're black boxes. But we can start to infer protocols, we can start to infer frequencies, we can start to infer how they're designed by what they don't play well with. So we started looking for signs of things in other places where it's like, oh, you shouldn't walk next to this with a pacemaker, you shouldn't walk next to this with an ICD. And start going, okay, these things, this is a blah-bitty-blah, it operates on frequency this. The pacemaker has to operate somewhere in a range of frequencies and power structures from there. So right now, it's almost purely black box to trying to find any real information about this.
There's a lot of effort to use the white spaces. I don't know if you guys know anything about that, but you probably do. But using the licensed but unused spectrums for some of this wireless communication.
Yes.
I just wanted to say I'm a nurse and I've been working with patients with ICDs and internal defibrillators, pacemakers for over 20 years from times that they were kind of really simple and not very well protected,
Yeah.
where you couldn't walk in front of a microwave without setting them off. And now they tell us, at least they tell the nursing staff, that most of these things are so well protected, but if you can access it with a signal through a telephone line, we know that it's not as protected as it could be. And I have to tell you that sometimes just the ethics of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I think the primary. She says that she's a nurse and she works with this. She's been working with people getting ICDs for about 20 years or so. And is it ethical to be doing this if we can't really protect it? I don't know. But people are doing it anyways, and people are getting it. They want their hearts to keep pumping. And so is a little piece of Faraday cloth going to protect them? Right, yeah. You know, actually, it's funny because one of the recent papers that talks about defense mechanisms for ICDs talks about using a cloaker that basically would act either as a proxy or a third-party authentication mechanism for the communication to your ICD. This was work done by UW. And the issue of that is that it's a fail-open thing, because if you have a medical emergency, right, just toss it off to the corner so it's no longer interacting with you. Now you can talk to now anything can talk to the ICD. So is that a scenario we want to live with? I don't know, maybe. Doesn't sound like the right solution to me.
Two related questions. One, when is this technology going to hit the developing world, if ever?
Mm-hmm.
And as a follow-up to that, what's the potential for knockoffs or pirated or
Yeah.
simulated?
Yeah. Is your ICD made in China? She's asking when is this going to hit the developing world, and what's the potential for knockoffs? I think it's already hit the developing world. In fact, I don't know how many of you know about medical tourism. We're pretty. I mean,
Tour, T-O-U-R.
yeah, like going. I mean, thank you. So, yeah.
All right, I think there's one last question.
So, like, if you're around a cell phone, would that, like, potentially mess with your,
Your implant.
yeah, mess with the implant, because doesn't that use microwave?
You should go do some testing on that.
No, I mean, the different devices operate on different frequencies,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it would be
it
designed
depends.
to not operate with something as common as a cell phone.
Pretty crowded.
It is.
I mean,
it
the
is.
spectrum is crowded, though, so...
But that's why I mentioned the white spaces stuff, right? Because some of the technology that they're looking at, trying to use some of that space that's unused, but kind of sitting between different places, right?
I think we're being kicked off.
Yeah, we
so-
got to leave. Thanks everybody for your time.